Welcome back to MadEmmyify True Crime. I know it has been far too long since I posted on this channel. I guess I kind of underestimated how much time I would have for editing videos for two channels. So yeah, but this I felt that I had to cover on both my ASMR channel and on this channel. So I'm posting videos for the next month, I guess, on my true crime channel. Hopefully I'll manage to keep it up after, but we shall see. Now, I know that the Titanic isn't strictly speaking a true crime, but it is still something that's very interesting. And it's something that has interested me for many years. This series will be broken up into three, potentially four parts. Part one will be covering the construction of the Titanic and everything up to the maiden voyage. Part two will be covering the journey and the sinking, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to break that up into two parts or whether that'll just be part two, and part three will kind of be the aftermath of everything, the British and American inquiry into the sinking, the law changes that happened because of the Titanic, and kind of what happened with the wreckage and everything after. So we shall see. I'm still in the process of writing part two out, so we'll see. I will know that on the next video I post, definitely, whether it's going to be a 3 or 4 part. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the story of the Titanic. In the early 19th century, sailing ships took about 6 weeks to cross the Atlantic. If the weather was bad, this could end up taking 14 weeks. This often led to passengers running out of food. In 1842, the British government passed laws that meant food had to be provided to passengers, though this was often of a very poor quality because they didn't really give them much to spend feeding these people that were sailing on the ships. Outbreaks of disease were very common on these early passenger ships as ship owners tried to cram as many people as possible into the ships to sail to America. In 1837, shipping companies began using steam-powered ships. The sailing cost was more expensive, but the journey time was much quicker. In 1838, the SS Great Western crossed the Atlantic in just 2 weeks. The building of the Great Western also laid the foundation for new shipbuilding techniques that would allow larger ships to be built. During this time, migration to America was also increasing enormously. I believe it was because America hadn't introduced the income tax yet, so all of your earnings were yours. So it was a good time to go to America because you could become very rich very quickly. It soon became a symbol of national and company status to build bigger, faster and more luxurious ships for transatlantic crossings. By the start of the 20th century, a transatlantic journey took just 1 week. The story of the Titanic starts as one of company rivalry. In 1839, Samuel Cunard had created the Cunard Line, and Cunard's ships were considered the fastest at crossing the Atlantic. But by 1870, Cunard was falling behind his rivals, the White Star Line and the Inman Line. Cunard lost the Blue Riband accolade, which was basically like a blue flag that you got to sail or fly rather on top of your ship to say that it was the fastest, not to be confused with the chocolate. And in 1871, the White Star Line ship, the Oceanic, took this accolade. The Riband did pass around several companies, all British until 1897, when a German shipping line, Norges Lloyd, or NDL, set a new speed record. Then, in 1902, American industrialist J.P. Morgan bought the White Star Line for $32 million. This was a massive blow to British shipping pride, so Cunard Line approached the British government in order to receive financial help to build a ship to compete with White Star and NDL. They received $2.6 million on the agreement that the ships, 1, could be used by the Royal Navy at any time, and 2, carry Royal Mail, and 3, be able to maintain an average speed of 24 to 25 knots. In 1907, Cunard Line unveiled Louisiana and Mauritania, I think it is. These 2 ships brought the Blue Riband back to the company and Great Britain. These were competitive times, so on a summer evening in 1907, Managing Director of White Star, Bruce Ismay, and Senior Partner of the shipyard Harland and Wolff, Lord Pierre, had dinner together and discussed building a ship bigger and better than any that belonged to the Cunard Lines. After the dinner, the 2 planned to create 3 of the most luxurious ships ever created: the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Gigantic, which was later named the Britannic, to be released in 1911, 1912 and 1913 respectively. The Titanic was designed to be the pride of White Star's fleet. Although designed to be fast, luxury was at the forefront of its design. Now, Harland and Wolff actually had an agreement with White Star in that Harland and Wolff would build all of their ships, and in return they would not build anyone else's ships, and White Star wouldn't go anywhere else for their ships. Construction on the Olympic began in 1907. The Titanic was the largest ever conceived vessel when designed. No facilities existed to build such a large ship. Harland and Wolff had to demolish 3 of their smaller slipways to build 2 new ones. 2 huge gantries were constructed by Sir William Arrol and Co., the Scottish firm that was behind the construction of the Forth Bridge and London's Tower Bridge. Apparently they also built the Redheugh Bridge in Newcastle, and there was a couple of other local bridges, but I can't remember off the top of my head. It was known as the Arrol Gantry and stood 220 feet tall. A 200-ton floating crane was also purchased to lift the boilers and other mechanical items into place. Titanic's construction officially began on March the 31st, 1909. Given that the Titanic was the largest movable structure ever made, it would need a massive power source. That source would be coal-powered steam, because they didn't have the motor engine in the same way that we do now, so steam was the best way to power things. 24 double-ended Scotch-class boilers and 5 single-ended boilers were constructed to fit in 6 boiler rooms. The double-ended boilers measured at 20 feet long and were 5 foot 9 inches wide, containing 6 coal-burning furnaces. The single-ended boilers were 11 foot 9 inches long and 11 foot 9 inches wider. With all boilers firing, the Titanic could produce 46,000 horsepower. Thomas Andrews, who designed the Titanic, had designed it to be so efficient that only 3 funnels were needed to service the boilers. However, White Star felt that a ship of such grandeur should have 4, so one of Titanic's funnels was purely for show. The funnels were constructed off-site and attached once Titanic was in dry dock, having its final fit. Titanic was equipped with a steam-powered triple-screw propulsion system. Its predicted speed would be around 22 knots, but the blades were deliberately put at such an angle that the ship would not vibrate, allowing for a smoother crossing. It took over 1 year to fully frame the Titanic. At the time of Titanic's construction, welding was in its infancy. The hull measured at 882.9 feet in length and was 92 foot wide. Over 3 million rivets were used to connect the iron plates to the hull, and the hull would contain 2,000 portholes. A 4-man crew could achieve 200 rivets, and these all had to be done by hand a day if the weather was good. After the sinking, the steel and construction was called into question, but the general belief is that other factors were a much bigger contributor to the sinking. The Titanic's anchor was also so large and heavy, weighing in at 16 tonnes, that 20 Clydesdale horses were needed to haul it to the railway station. In total, 15,000 workers constructed both the Titanic and the Olympic. The structures were so large that they could be seen across Belfast, and of those working on Titanic, 8 lost their lives during the construction. Part of the reason that Titanic was branded as this unsinkable ship was its innovative hull design that contained 16 watertight hull compartments. These were designed so that even if the 2 in the middle or 4 at the front or the rear flooded, the ship would stay afloat. However, Titanic began to go massively over budget in her construction, so cutbacks were made. One of these cutbacks meant that the bulkheads between compartments only reached 10 foot above the waterline, so water could kind of easily flood between multiple compartments. Titanic was also originally supposed to have 64 lifeboats, more than enough for the capacity of 3,300 passengers, but she was only given 20, enough for 1,178 of the estimated 2,223 of the passengers booked on her maiden voyage. Nobody actually knows the exact number of passengers that were on the Titanic. This is because a lot of people did cancel their trips at the last minute. I think like 20 people cancelled their trips because they'd had a dream that the Titanic would sink. On May the 31st, 1911, Titanic was released from dry dock and the interior construction began. The grand staircase into the first-class dining room was considered Titanic's crowning glory. It was constructed from polished oak, wrought iron and boutique glass. The staircase was situated below a dome that gave an illusion of natural light, no matter what time of the day. The centrepiece of the staircase was a large carved panel containing a clock. First-class passengers had access to a large selection of facilities on the Titanic. There was a state-of-the-art gymnasium on the boat deck containing weights, rowing machines, stationary bikes, as well as a mechanical horse and a mechanical camel. It would cost you 1 shilling, which would be around £3.70, to use the gym. There was also an exclusive men-only Turkish baths where you could pay $1 to visit these and use the hot, temperate or cool rooms. I don't know what that works out in modern money, I'm afraid. There was also a steam room, a private toilet and a shampoo room. The Turkish baths also featured a marble drinking fountain and Arabic-style lounge chairs. First-class accommodation comprised of 2 parlour suites, each with their own private promenade, and 67 other rooms and suites, some of which featured coal-burning fireplaces. There were also around 350 cheaper first-class cabins with single beds. First-class passengers also had access to a Parisian cafe, a French-style cafe which was complete with French waiters, the Verdana cafe which featured real palm trees, a first-class lounge, a reading and writing room which was for the ladies, a first-class smoking room which was only for the men, I'm afraid, and a reception room and the first-class dining room. Second-class passengers also had access to their own smoking room. Again, this was only for the men. There was also a second class library and dining room. The rooms were much smaller for those in second class. Each room was either 2 or 4 berth with limited privacy. The Titanic could accommodate 550 second class passengers. The second class passengers didn't have the luxury of in-cabin bathrooms. Instead, they had a chamber pot, and there were a number of communal bathrooms that they could use. Third class, or steerage, was a lot less luxurious, but would have still offered more luxury than other liners would have at the time. A third class cabin was mostly made up of 6 bunk beds with a few 2-berth rooms. Like the second class, they also shared a bathroom, but in third class there were only 2 baths available for the 710 passengers. One of the baths was for men and one was for women. In those days though, a lot of the poor believed that frequent baths caused respiratory disease, so they likely weren't that bothered about having the bath. Which did make me wonder, like, you know, in the movie Titanic, when Jack and Rose had sex, how long had it been since he last washed? Those in third class also had their own dining and smoking room alongside a general room for socialising. The Titanic also featured electric lighting and heating in every stateroom. There was also a piano in the third class general room, which would have been considered a massive luxury. 4 electric elevators, 3 in first class, 1 in second, a state-of-the-art infirmary and operating room staffed with 2 doctors, a fully equipped dark room for amateur photographers, a 50-phone switchboard and operator for intra-ship calls, a Marconi wireless radio that had been supplied by the Marconi International Marine Communication Company, along with 2 employees, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride. The job of these operators was primarily to send and receive passenger telegrams, as well as handling navigation messages, including weather and ice warnings. Titanic also had a state-of-the-art 5 kilowatt spark gas transmitter. This gave Titanic a very distinct tone to its transmissions. Finally, in February 1912, Titanic was dry docked one last time to fit her propeller, and she was ready for sea trials. Sea trials are basically kind of testing the capabilities of a ship. Titanic sea trials were postponed due to the weather, but they finally began on April the 2nd, 1912. These sea trials were a range of tests to ascertain the capabilities of the Titanic. These trials found that she had a maximum speed of 20 knots, a 3,520 metre turning circle, and a stopping distance of 777 metres. After these trials, Titanic left Belfast to sail the 550 miles to Southampton. In total, the Titanic had cost $7,500,000 to build, but if you were to build the same ship today, it would cost you around $400 million. Titanic arrived in Southampton just 6 days before her maiden voyage. White Star Line set about loading the ship with provisions, linens and furniture for the maiden voyage. Staff were also quickly selected and trained. On April the 5th, Titanic was opened very briefly for viewing by those willing to pay. Captain Edward John Smith was chosen as captain. He had previously been the captain of the Olympic and had been on the bridge when Olympic was involved in a collision with HMS Hawker. It should have been a sign, really. But he had a lot of experience and was favoured by those high up in White Star. At 7:30 a.m. on the morning of April the 10th, 1912, Captain Smith boarded the ship for the maiden voyage. All crew were already on board. They had stayed the night on the ship. At 9:30 a.m, the second and third class passengers began to board, followed by the first class passengers at around 11:30. The price difference for those in first class compared to third class was massive, with a parlour suite setting you back £870 back then, which would be about £100,000 in today's money, or £30, £3,500 for a first class single berth. It was £12 or £1,379 in today's money for second class, and £8 or £625 for third class, which would be nearly a month's wages for a skilled labourer. The third class price was considered high for the time, but those in third class were willing to pay to start a new life. If you were travelling on the Titanic in third class, you weren't just going on holiday, you were going to start your new life in America. At 12 p.m, Titanic cast off from Southampton docks, watched by excited crowds, though almost immediately the Titanic almost struck the USMS New York that was moored up due to the coal strike that had been going on. Titanic missed the New York by just 4 feet, and the departure from Southampton was delayed by an hour. Titanic began the short 84-mile journey to its first stop, which was Cherbourg in France, and that is where we will leave things for this week. If you come back next week, I will tell you all about the maiden voyage and the sinking of the Titanic. I hope to see you all then. Good night, and don't have nightmares.